Hi, welcome back to Good Job Mom. Today I'm going to talk to you about everything that has been happening, technically, really, as long as we've been alive. But I'm going to talk specifically about what's happened recently in the past few months and also the past couple weeks. It has been a really heavy couple weeks, to be honest. It's been a really heavy, last year, 2019 was really heavy. My son experienced racism for the first time, to him, directly to him. I mean, people had said racist comments to me about him, before, when he was a baby and a toddler and everything. But he experienced his first racist interaction, with another child. And then obviously this year has just been super heavy. And now the past couple weeks have been really hard. I grew up in a home where my mother made it, very clear that Black people and Black and brown people, people of color, are to be seen equally to us. She explained how Black people were not treated equally and how she would not tolerate that in our house. And that's just the home that I grew up in. I was not always aware of my privilege. I was not always aware of microaggressions. I definitely, I grew up poor and with a single mother and in a one-bedroom home. And so anytime someone would bring up privilege, white privilege, it would make me upset, because I was like, well, I grew up, like in a not so great area, in a tiny little home, and my mother had to work by herself. And years later, as I've evolved, I realized that white privilege had nothing to do with that. So, I'm talking to people out there, you guys, specifically my white brothers and sisters. When you hear privilege, you might get upset, but it has nothing to do with, where you grew up, how you grew up. It has nothing to do with that. White privilege is not having to second guess if you weren't hired because of the color of your skin. White privilege is not being followed when you're grocery shopping or in a store. White privilege is being able to possibly talk to an officer very rudely and still being able to walk away from that situation alive. So anyone who may have felt or may still feel offended when you hear white privilege, it has nothing to do with how you grew up. It has everything to do with the fact that your white skin allots you privileges that Black people don't have. I used to be on Twitter all the time, and there was, I'm just gonna say it, y'all don't come for me, okay? But when Beyonce had Blue Ivy, a lot of people were in uproar over the way that Beyonce cared for her daughter's hair. Now I realize that's absolutely ridiculous. 6 years ago, what was probably 6.5 years ago, I had no idea. So those of you who do know me, my Black friends, my Black acquaintances that were there in my life, for me to be ignorant in certain instances, I thank you for showing me grace. I saw two people that I followed on Twitter talking about, Blue Ivy and how, what do people just want Beyonce to slap a wig on her. And, I inserted my opinion into that conversation. I felt like I could insert myself into that conversation to discuss that topic. And thankfully, to other people who had a conversation with me, thankfully to all the people that came for me that day on Twitter, and whoo, did they come for me. They came for me. And rightfully so. My eyes were opened. I had an awakening. And I will say it was that day. I've always known racism is like a thing, right? But racism isn't just saying the N-word. That's extreme racism. You can still be racist. And I know right now, my white friends, my white brothers and sisters, you may want to turn this video off right now because you're like, oh girl, this you tried it. But nah, it's the truth. Racism goes so much deeper than these extreme forms of racism. And so that day when people came for me on Twitter over this topic, over me inserting my white perspective and my white opinion about Black hair, was the day that I had an awakening. And you might be like, Whitney, why can't you say something about another woman's daughter's hair? And the thing is, I can't. I shouldn't. First of all, what is my standard of beauty? Why isn't Black hair in its natural state taken as beautiful? Because subconsciously, and I didn't know that, but I do now, subconsciously, I am comparing Black hair to European standards. Not only am I doing that, but this is what the Black culture has had to deal with for years. They have had to deal with assimilating into white culture and doing things, taking their Black hair and their Black features and try to fit in. And thank God now there has been an awakening of natural hair and Black beauty in its natural state. But it hasn't always been that way, and it still isn't, because there's even cases where children are told they cannot wear dreads, where people are told they cannot wear dreads to school or to work. And that's ridiculous. So that day when I was called out, I had conversations. I dug deep. What I realized was I did not need to insert my opinion. I needed to listen. And for years, that whole conversation, because specifically I went back and forth with one person. And I remember I did end up, after, I think it was a couple years, I finally emailed that person and I said, hey, I'm sorry. I did not know that that was my privilege. I didn't know. And so you may not know. You may not know what you're doing is problematic. You may not know. I'm sure there's more things that I'm doing every day. I mean, I haven't made it. And every day I am assessing my opinions and I am assessing my interactions, because it's not enough to just not be racist. And I know that we see this floating around a lot, but it's true. It's not enough to not be racist. You have to be anti-racist. And what anti-racist means is we have to check, our thoughts and our opinions and where they're stemming from. And we have to actually make change. We have to actually have conversations. We have to have the conversations with ourselves, ask ourselves why we think a certain way. We need to be putting our feet in motion, our mouths in motion, our money in motion, to be anti-racist. To be silent isn't okay. And so I sent that email. I apologized. Thankfully, it was received well. And it was a huge moment for me. I was pregnant with my son. Trayvon Martin died. He was killed. Zimmerman went free. And as that verdict was announced, I cried because I knew that Black lives did not matter. They did not have value to people. Not all, but a lot. And that was hard. Something I knew, but I didn't really know it. And I knew that I was about to bring a Black child, a Black son into this world. And that I was going to have to do everything that I can to protect him. And not just him, but do the work to help the movement, of racial equality. Racism is real. It's not imaginary. And it's very sad that Black perspectives and Black experiences are not believed. It's heartbreaking. You know, do you think that all the Black people in the world have just joined together on some private message and have been like, you know what? Let's just say it's happening, but it's not happening. You think that's what is happening? So I want to challenge you that when a Black person says, hey man, this is how someone treated me, and this is how they made me feel, and they have no reason to do that, it's because I'm Black, I challenge you to believe them. When a Black person comes to you and says, hey man, this person was racist, this made me uncomfortable, I got followed around in a store, I got called a thug because I wore something that any white man can wear and just be looked at as normal, I got told that they don't like Black people, but hey, you know, this Black person is okay in my book. All of these things are racist. And when a Black person comes to you and they feel safe enough to come to you and say, hey, this is my experience, you need to believe them. The Black people in your life, if you're treating them like crap, you need to assess why. It's not enough to have Black people in your circle. It's not enough to hire people of color. Have you checked on them since George Floyd died? Since Breonna Taylor died? Since Ahmaud Arbery died? Have you called your Black friends and said, hey, or text them, message them, hey, how are you feeling? What's going on? What's going through your head? How can I help you? What can I do for you? I'm just checking in on you. I love you. Have you done that? If you haven't, you don't have Black friends. And I don't want to hear, well, you know, I maybe they're okay, and I don't want to make like it awkward and uncomfortable. If first of all, they're not your friend if you don't realize that this is like a real thing. This isn't about feeling uncomfortable or awkward. If you legit have a Black friend, you know that this is their life. You know that almost every day of their life, they're meeting microaggressions of racism. Also, my white friends, my white brothers and sisters, when you're called out on racism, listen, man, I'm sure that's very hard. I'm sure it's hard. I'm sure it's very hard to hear. But it is not the job of that person of color who called you out on racism to comfort you. It is not the job of your Black and brown friends when someone else has called you racist for them to comfort you. It's not their job. Do you know what it's like for a Black person to experience racism? Neither do I. I have no idea. But I can imagine that it's something that they have to emotionally tackle. So why add on us needing to be comforted? They need to be comforted. Racism isn't blatant at times. Sometimes it comes in forms of microaggressions. Racism comes in so many different forms. And I know this might sound really crazy, but you can be married to a Black person. You can have biracial children. You can employ Black and brown people. You can have Black and brown friends and still be racist. And that is why I say you have to do the work. Your interactions, you need to assess why you interact the way that you do. What happened to Brianna and Ahmaud and George is horrific. To me, what's been awful to see is people posting about, well, first, let's say this. What's awful to see, and I'm just going to specifically talk about George Floyd. George Floyd was killed. There's video. There's almost 9 minutes of him being on that ground. Almost 9 minutes. And what's so sad is that some people haven't posted anything about it. They haven't said a word. But then they scream from the mountaintops about rioting and looting. They scream from the mountaintops about that, but they said nothing about George Floyd. If you're doing that, you also need to ask yourself why. I'm going to tell you straight up, it's not okay to not address the death, but to address the rioting and looting. I think it's also important to remember why the protests are happening and why the rioting and looting is happening. Why? Why is it happening? Because George Floyd was handcuffed and smothered to death on the ground. What's really wild to me is I'm on Facebook and I see all these comments and I can't just scroll past them. I use my voice and I get into these conversations and so many people are like, oh, what happened to George Floyd is really terrible, but da-da-da-da. And it's like, nah, bro. All you need to say is what happened to George Floyd is terrible. Period. End of sentence. We don't need a but. People of color, Black and brown people, they don't need a but. They just need to be seen. They just need to be validated. What can we do to help people of color be seen, to help Black and brown people be seen and validated? We can say, dang, that really is terrible. Period. What happened to George Floyd is terrible. Period. Hey friend, how are you doing this week? I saw what happened with George Floyd. I saw what happened with Ahmaud Arbery. I saw what happened with Breonna Taylor. How are you feeling? This is awful. Period. We don't need to say, oh, these protests are in the way of me getting to work. We don't need to say the rioting and looting is bad. What does that do to tear down a neighborhood? That's not going to bring change. No, skirt. No, cut it out. What we need, people who are so sad from this, what Black and brown people need during this time is to be validated and seen. It's not that hard. And for some of y'all who haven't even posted anything yet, and let me get this straight. Like, first of all, I know that posting can be performative. I know that. I know that it's possibly not real. So I get that. I also know that some of us are doing work behind the scenes. Some of us are donating, signing petitions, calling mayors. Like, I get that. But if you're doing all that, you could also post. Use your voice. I'm sure you've got some people on your friends list, in your network, that need to be told, like, this is wrong, period. No buts. No, oh, but, you know, this won't solve the problem, and da-da-da. Yeah, we know. We know. Trust me, I know. I know. I know that some things will not solve the problem. won't solve my son being treated like crap because his skin is brown. I know that some things won't solve my husband being treated like crap because of the color of his skin. My friends that are hurting so bad right now. But it feels good for them to be seen. It feels good that people see my family. It feels good to see somebody that I look up to or that I like just post, man, this is wrong. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel like my son can be safe because one more person knows that it's wrong. It makes me feel like maybe my son could have a play date with your son. It makes me feel like my husband can go hang out with somebody and chill or have conversations and feel safe and feel believed. That's what posting and donating and taking action and doing the work does. And it's not an end all be all. This is a fight that's going to last beyond us. Prayerfully, it'll all come to fruition when my kids are adults or they have kids. But we've got to do something. Why aren't you doing anything? If you haven't done anything yet, why aren't you doing anything? Why? Why? And I'm not Black, clearly. I'm enraged and I'm sad. All the time. Because I've seen the way people treat my husband because of the color of his skin. And I've seen the way that people talk to my son because of the color of their skin. And because of the color of his skin. And if I feel like this, I can't imagine what my Black and brown friends have been going through their entire lives. We have to have a race talk. We've already done it. And we have to do it again. And in this past year, we've had to do damage control. And it's been hard. I was talking to my mother-in-law and just talking about when she grew up. How she had to have the talk with my husband and her other kids. And how she didn't even have the talk with her mother when she was a child because she was like, it was so blatant. So it wasn't like necessary to have that talk, is what she said. We have to do the work so that Black and brown people don't have to have this conversation with their kids. It's not okay. It's not okay. And people may say, you hear people say, this happened forever, like Black people just need to get over it. Slavery happened forever ago and they just need to get over it. That is pain passed down from generation to generation to generation. And sure, healing would be great, but imagine trying to heal from something that pain that's been passed down. You're trying to heal from that while also just being hit with it. It's a reminder. So when you want to tell somebody to get over it because it happened so long ago, it didn't happen so long ago, because that pain is constant. And like I said in an interview that I did with a friend of ours, and I said in conversation to another friend of mine, if people can't get over their abandonment issues or their family issues and their daddy issues and all of these things, right? Or their mommy issues. And, you know, I'm in my 30s, so I'm just gonna like address that. But if people can't get over that in their 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years of life, then what makes you think that a whole group and race of people can get over something that lasted way, way longer than 30, 40, 50, 60 years? It's time to validate. It's time to see. It's time to say, hey, I see you. I see you. It's time to treat the Black and brown people around us the way that we would treat the white people around us. And it's time to treat Black and brown children the way that we treat white children. When you see a Black child and you see a white child and you're like, oh my God, you're so cute, to the white child, why aren't you saying that about the Black or brown child? Ask yourself that. I've seen it happen to my kids. White babies, my brown babies. And my brown babies are right here. And the only child that someone decides to say, hey, wow, they're so cute, is the white child. Why? Is brown skin not beautiful to you? Is the curly hair not beautiful to you? Or the brown eyes not beautiful to you? Why? Why? We have to stop ignoring this. It's real. We have to be intentional with making change. We have the power to do so. We have the power to use our voice. I want to give you some steps that I've personally taken, and that I've also, you know, through reading, seen that these are steps that are also great. You can start using your voice. You can start using your white privilege. It sucks that not everybody has white privilege, but we have it. Let's use it for good. One of the first steps that you can take is to post, use your platform. All the white people on your Instagram and your Twitter and your Facebook that maybe don't have any Black friends or just have one Black friend, you can repost to your stories. You can repost on Facebook. Just do it. It's simple. Obviously, you need to do more than that, but that is a really good start, because silence is not an option. Silence is absolutely unacceptable. Number 2, listen. When you are around Black and brown voices, be quiet and just listen to what they have to say. If they bring up race and they decide that they want to talk about what is happening, listen. If you want to ask them about what's been happening, sure, but ask them, hey, I'd like to have a conversation with you about George Floyd, about Ahmaud Arbery, about all of these unjust killings of Black men and women. Is that okay with you? Are you up for that? And they'll answer yes or no. And then when they start talking about it, listen. Something else that has really helped me along the way has been to follow Black activists, to follow Black and brown people on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I'm gonna drop links to, everything that I'm mentioning down below here on YouTube, just suggestions that I'd like to give you. Expand your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, your social media, even expand the TV shows that you watch. Or the TV shows and the movies that you're watching, do they have Black and brown actors? Do they have Black and brown voices and perspective? The news channels that you're watching, do they have Black and brown voices? Another suggestion is to read some books. There are so many books available to learn from. Also, if you come across a book that you really love, and in your local library, that book is not there, you can call your library and request that they stock their library up with those books. So look up some Black authors, read some of these books by Black authors, and say like, oh, you know what? I really like that. I am going to use my voice to call up a library and ask that they stock some more Black authors around these topics in the library and make them available. Another thing that you can do is request action, reach out to mayors, write emails, write letters, call. You can also sign petitions, and you can also donate. I suggest, as far as donations go, to start donating monthly somewhere. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. You can donate $5 or $10 a month. You can up that and it be more than that. But I mean, you can start as low as $5 or $10. And so find, one organization or a few organizations where you want to donate your money. Again, I'm going to link these places that I personally donated and that I know other people have donated to. This is a great way to be a part of the change. You may not be able to protest. You may not be able to like get out there to the streets, but you can send your money in. You can help those people who are out there protesting. My last suggestion to you is to support Black-owned businesses. You can definitely find some Black-owned businesses in your area and online. It is really easy now because a lot of us shop online anyway. We sent flowers to my mother-in-law in Brooklyn, and I found a Black-owned flower shop in her area, called in that order, and it was delivered. There are so many options, and I really hope that this talk has just planted a seed for one of you. I really hope that this has inspired you to make some change. I hope that this has made a difference. And I hope that in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, when we look back, that you and I can say that we were on the right side of history, that we helped bring change in a good way. Thank you so much for joining Good Job Mom today. Thank you for joining me for this super intense and real conversation. And if you're still here at the end of this video, you're a real one. So thank you. Pass this along to, a friend. Tell them to watch the whole thing and share it to your feed. Subscribe to my channel. But just let's be a part of the change, and not in some fake, phony, corny type of way. Like, let's for real do the work.